Welcome to another episode of Rising Stories. I'm Corine Sandifer, your host, and if this is your first time on the podcast, welcome and thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoy it. If you are a regular listener, I want to say a big thank you for tuning in each week. I really appreciate it. So each week I interview a business owner or an author, and I ask them those questions that we all want to ask when we meet someone who has started a business. How did you do it? What about your full-time job? When did you have time? How did you juggle family and writing a book? I'm so curious about these questions, and that's why I started this podcast. And I also wanted you, the listener, to gain some knowledge about writing or working a business and to leave inspired to keep rising. If you are on any social media, please connect with me. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook and LinkedIn under Corine Sandifer. So go over and check me out. And also, would you do me a huge favor and leave me a comment on iTunes? By doing this small favor for me, you are helping others find this podcast. My guest today is Cheri Keaggy. Cheri is a singer, songwriter, and speaker who travels all over the country sharing her story of restoration and healing post-divorce. She speaks about the 3 things that we all need to move forward after a life-changing event. Cheri and I have been friends for years now, and it was great to catch up with her. We talked about everything from Kickstarter to the nuts and bolts of ministry to what she eats every single day. I know you will enjoy listening to her story. Here is my conversation with Cheri Keaggy.
Thanks for having me. I'm interested to see what, this new thing that God is doing in your life, and so fun to be a part of it.
Thanks. Well, I have really enjoyed it, and I guess I caught the bug because I was doing a radio show with a girlfriend of mine, and I really liked it, and I wish that I had gone into radio, but here I am, so I'm really loving this. But tell everybody who Cheri Keaggy is, and of course I know, but other people don't. So and it's funny because you and I are like, our girls went to school together, so we know each other as moms and parents of our girls' school, and we do all kinds of stuff there, or we did, but now they're grown. And so, but tell me who you are and what you do.
Yes, I am. I'm a singer-songwriter. I live in Nashville, although I'm native of Southern California, but I've been singing and recording music for 20 plus years now. My debut album came out in '94, and which means I'm a veteran now.
You are.
First rodeo, but I also speak, and just as things have evolved, I would end up sharing a lot in between songs from stage, and that developed into more of a speaking thing. So I do more women's events these days where I will go and speak and sing whatever is needed, for their event.
Yeah. What would you say? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and I blog too, periodically.
Yes, you do. Yeah.
I love to write. Writing is my passion, whether that's music or, something else, some kind of devotional thing. So,
what do you like the best? Do you like speaking, or is it all just kind of equal? Speaking, singing, songwriting?
That's a good question. I don't know that I have said, "Oh, I like this better than that." I will say that the music has been there a long time, and from an early age, when I was 7 years old, I started taking piano lessons. So for as long as I can remember, really, music has been a part of my life in one shape or another. But the speaking thing is. I still feel like there's room for growth even in that, but I'm loving the challenge, and I love the preparation. I mean, it's a lot of hours, it's a lot of work, but I love digging into my Bible. I've always been a Bible study girl, and then just taking my own life story and my own life experience and weaving it in and out of truths that help us grow and anchor us. And so I really am enjoying that. And the music will always be there, it's because
Yeah.
it's who I
It's part
am.
of you. Yeah.
Yeah. The speaking is so wonderful because you can say so much more in a 45-minute talk than you can in a 3.5-minute song.
Right. Right. And don't you feel like when you, because I've watched my husband, because he was in the music industry years ago, and I've watched him, and when you speak, I imagine that you can say more, but B, you can also almost like see a reaction, or people will come up and maybe share a little bit more of their story with you. I don't know
Yeah.
if you found that to be true. Whereas with music, you sing a song and what their response is clapping to say, I like it. They clap to
Yeah.
say they like it, but a lot of times they don't. I guess maybe a few will come up and say that song really touched me. But like you
Yeah.
said, more words, more, I guess, more impact.
Yeah, more depth of story. It allows me to be even more vulnerable with an audience, and I think people really appreciate that because they see, wow, okay, she's not perfect. I can identify with that because I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
And it, I think anytime we share something of ourselves, something that's real, a struggle that we've been through, uh, there is there's a camaraderie that develops. We feel a connection with one another,
Mm-hmm.
that we're all just doing our best in this crazy world that we're living in. And look, together we can point each other towards Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know if all of your guests are of a certain faith or not, what your
Yeah,
listening
they're
audience
from all
is.
over. Yeah.
Yeah, but and for me, that's my faith is such a huge part of my business, if you will, because
Mm-hmm.
the the business is the means by which I can share my faith through these different mediums,
Yeah.
and it's the nuts and bolts that make it happen. So,
Well, tell me, you were saying, about being vulnerable and real. You have a video out, which I just saw that um, was about restoration and healing, because you had a time there, I guess, was it a 1 or 2 year period, maybe, or 1 year?
well, many
Everything
years leading up to it, yeah.
where everything was coming kind of to a head, maybe, or just
Yes,
feeling
yeah.
like it was falling apart and things were not as they were. Um,
Hmm.
and tell me about that time in your life.
Yeah.
And
Well, there was a really probably like a 6 month period where everything was accelerating, and there were some good things, some joyous things, but mainly our family was unraveling. In a 6 month period, it was my daughter's high school graduation and my son's wedding. My grandmother passed away, my grandfather passed away 2 months after her. We did a short sale. We had the big house on the hill in Brentwood, and had to
mhm,
do a short sale uh, with our house. And then in all of that, my 22-year marriage to my high school sweetheart was unraveling, and it had been a long journey. Anyone who's been married for that length of time, there's highs, there's lows, there's everything in between.
yeah,
And that's never the story I had wanted to tell. I never thought I would be in this club, the divorced club, but in all of those changes and losses, in all of that grief, God met me in real tangible ways and loved on me through the body of Christ, the beloved community. Um, and there's a testimony that I tell that was sort of a turning point for me, because I was at probably one of my lowest points in my life in the middle of all that change and uncertainty. And I went to my home church and listened to a sermon, and the pastor preached about the 3 things we need to survive. And I felt like I was in survival mode for sure. And I was riddled, racked with fear.
Mm,
What was going to happen? What would my life look like? Where was I going to live?
yeah.
Would I be single the rest of my life? On and on. Anyway, and he said the three things. He said, one, we need air; two, we need food and water; and three, we need God's presence. And that sounds very simple, but for me, where I was, as desperate as I was, I needed to come back to that. I needed to come back to that foundation. And I knew that, okay, there's all these unknowns in my life that are causing me a lot of anxiety. But there's those knowns
Yeah.
that I do have the foundation of Christ. And I knew in that moment that the God who sees saw me, and that I would somehow, that I would be okay. And I understood, like I never had before, what it means when we talk about his grace is sufficient. I understood the all sufficiency of Christ, that when everything around you is crumbling, he truly is enough. I mean, if you had, he is enough. And that might sound a little, cliche, and you don't necessarily discover that until you hit the
Right. So
hard
you
place.
hit that low. Yeah.
And that's what happened with me. And so it's been several years now. That was 2010. And so there's been a lot of healing that has transpired since then, and a lot of fruit and songs and teaching that has flowed out of that,
Mhm.
all that God was teaching me through those hard things. So I'm grateful.
Yeah. Well, I saw you, from a distance because our lives kind of after our girls graduated, we weren't as connected, but I would see you off and on, but I saw how the Lord just like it was almost like he was just feeding you all these great songs and you were just, being stretched, but in a good way and in the way that I guess he wanted you to be, where he wanted you to be, is what I saw from a distance. And I thought that was really cool that you
Mhm.
were, I don't know if I would have been so willing. I would have been like, no, I don't want this. And,
Uh-huh.
I'm going to just sit on the floor and pout. But I felt like you were just kind of like, I'm just gonna keep moving and keep going, and you did, and I really saw a lot of good fruit from that from you, and really exciting times for you. But I'm
And that's
sure,
the I mean, I did have the I don't want to keep going kind of days, that
yeah,
keep it real, but God is one who brings beauty from ashes,
true.
and certainly done that with my story. And I've said often that we don't really learn how to trust God until we have no other choice. And so, well, okay, here I am, God, you're not my plan B, you are my plan A, so
Hmm.
unfold it before me. I became very dependent on him, and discovered God as my Jehovah Jireh, the Lord who provides, discovered him as Jehovah Rapha, the Lord who heals. And so he became, while I had an earth husband,
Hmm.
my high school sweetheart from when we met when we were teenagers, um, Christ became my husband with a capital H,
Hmm.
and really walked me through. Uh, I had been on a major record label back in the day, where you have all kinds of support, and here I was, and having to figure out, God had birthed all these new songs that were an outpouring of that season, but I wasn't sure the semantics, the actual steps to go through and release another record. And my ex had always been involved in some way, shape, or form with that. And so here I was, wow, this is really uncharted territory. What now?
Yeah, yeah, and it is scary to, when you feel like you had a safety net or just a good partner to do that with, and then having to do it all alone. Well, tell me now, I want to talk to the business part of the business, Cheri Keaggy. So
Yeah.
so you are left with, you have to do this new album, and like how did you do all that? And did you just kind of, learn as you go? Did you hire somebody? Like, did you just take it one step at a time and learned as you go, kind of do it yourself?
Yeah. Well, I had attended a conference, a women's equipping conference in North Carolina that was a pivotal time because I wasn't sure what my next steps were. And at that conference, I felt God's strong urging that I was to come back home and begin to write again. And this was after a long drought. So that was just a matter of sheer white knuckle obedience. Okay, God, I don't know. I'm feeling a little rusty here, but I sat down and wrote. So the songs came, and then um, I I remember at one point I was talking with a gentleman, just a ministry friend. I've sung at his church many times, and he has done a lot of fundraising for missions work in Guatemala, their church, and so I was telling him I had these songs, but I wasn't sure how to proceed, and he said, we could probably raise the money, or because when you're on a label, they put up the money.
Right.
And I've been an independent artist now for some years, and so around that time, I started hearing more about the crowdfunding model and seeing other artists, other veteran artists such as myself that had success with these Kickstarter campaigns.
Yes.
And so I started paying attention to that a little bit more, and wondering if that might be the means by which God would help me. There was one night I had so much anxiety about what I call the nuts and bolts of ministry. That's what you and I are talking about right now.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
How the steps, what are, and I remember I was just flooded with anxiety, and I said, Lord, would you give me a verse to hold on to in this scary new season? And he gave me Psalm 138:8a that says, the Lord will fulfill his purpose for you. So I had that as a guide, as an anchor through all of this. The Lord will fulfill his purpose for you. Okay. He's going to show me. I don't know what the next 5 steps are, but he's going to show me the next 1 step. Mm-hmm. And so I mustered up the courage to launch a Kickstarter campaign. And that ministry friend that I referred to, he kind of helped me with some of the computer aspects of that. Mm-hmm. I've been somewhat technically challenged, but I've grown leaps and bounds through this, but he helped me with some of that. I provided him a lot of content, telling the story of this new batch of songs, and he sort of helped set up the site, and then we launched, and I had another friend, a gal I had met in a divorce care group through my church, who was like the marketing chick, and you asked, did I hire people? I didn't really even hire her. I knew I'd been sending e-newsletters, so I'd had, you do through Constant Contact, or I use Emma. Mm-hmm. And so I have, those email addresses are so valuable because those are the people that are really dialed into what you're doing, and really care about what Cheri Keaggy's next move is. It's like your tribe, to use Seth Godin's speak, right? Mm-hmm. I read his book called Tribes, actually, which was a good, he was talking about, when you have a following of some kind, which I do, I have people who have dialed into my ministry through the years. He says it requires to lead your followers. It requires generosity and bravery, and so, yes. Okay, this is a brave step, but anyway, losing my train of thought.
So your friend from church did the marketing for you, started helping you with marketing?
Yes. So with the e-newsletters, I would, again, create the content. I would write and share, tell the story, and I'd send that all to her, and she'd plug it into the format, for the e-newsletter. And so I was sending weekly e-newsletters, updating people about the campaign, how we were doing, and I was on my knees a lot during that time, just knowing this was so much bigger than me, but that God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. Yes. And if he wants for this music to be heard through a recording, then he would make it happen, and by golly, he did. So I've had 2 successful Kickstarter campaigns in these recent years, and that's how God has enabled me to continue recording new music.
Wow, so you've got a Kickstarter success stories. You've got
Yeah, yeah, and that was just such a faith building thing, because you don't want to disappoint. Like
yeah,
everyone, you want to reach your goal, and
yeah,
there's different crowdfunding formats. But with Kickstarter, if you don't reach your goal, you don't get any of the money,
right.
and so everyone is disappointed.
Yes,
Um, but there's also though a high standard. Okay, we've got to reach this goal, or it's a bust.
right,
So I was just so delighted and humbled that God provided in that way. And then I could go into the studio and pay the musicians and pay the
right,
engineer and you know, pay a photographer and, just the whole packaging. So uh, God would just sort of shine the light on the next step and the next step. And it's just overcoming those fears of, oh, I don't know how to do this. Well, if I was stuck on something I didn't know how to do, I would just, call a friend who was more computer savvy and, and get help that way. I have a guy now who continues to help me with my e-newsletters and that sort of thing.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
I need
uh,
a lot of help there too sometimes. Just MailChimp and which is what I use MailChimp. We are not friends. I cannot, sometimes it just like, uh, but I have in the past hired a virtual assistant and that helps because I am just
oh,
not that technical. I mean, I love
okay.
social media and I do all kinds of stuff, but I'm not, I don't know. There's something about me and MailChimp just do not mix. Well, so I have this one question that has been on my mind forever since I've known you is how are you related to Phil Keaggy?
Yeah. Phil, I was married to Phil's nephew.
Okay.
So since age 18.
Yeah.
So, uh, Phil would be like my uncle-in-law through marriage to his
Okay.
nephew. Yeah.
Got it. And I mean, I
Yeah.
knew your last time was like, I know they're Keaggys, so it must be on his side, but it was like, how, like, because I guess because I thought, well, that's her uncle, and somehow there was that music gene that got passed to you.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, my dad. Okay, so for your listeners who don't know Phil Keaggy's music, he's just one of the world's, literally, I'm not exaggerating, one of the world's greatest guitar players, and highly lauded in his industry, both in the Christian music industry, but in secular realms as well. But in one of the pioneers of Christian music. But my dad, my actual dad, because people often think Phil is my dad, but my actual dad does not play the guitar. He plays the ever popular accordion.
He does? Oh, I love the
Yeah,
accordion.
yeah, so I do have some musical genes in
Yeah.
there, but anyway,
And you
uh,
play the
Phil
piano. Oh,
Phil
go
was
ahead.
a huge support, a piece of this as well, because my ex had always recorded my piano vocal demos. Usually when you're preparing to do a record, you 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 record some basic, stripped down recordings of these songs, and you kind of collectively decide which are the stronger ones, and the stronger ones rise to the top, and you kind of begin to shape which ones you're going to actually record.
Right.
Well, so I had that, so that piece was no longer there. And but Phil Keaggy, he was so gracious and kind and generous with his time, and offered to help me in any way that I needed help. And
Wow.
he's just such a fan. And so he has a studio in his basement, and so I went and did my piano vocal demos with Uncle Phil,
Oh,
and so that helped me technically and all of that with the logistical, but also more importantly, uh, he was such an encouragement to me at a time when I was a little pressed down, if you
yeah.
know what I mean.
Yeah.
That I was maybe had a little self doubt. Could I still write good songs? Would God still use me post divorce? Would you know? Or do I need to consider something else? And he just just as I'd unroll another song and another song and another song, and he was getting it,
That's
just
awesome.
at heart level, like celebrating, wow, this is real. This is touching me. At one point I looked over at him and he had tears streaming down his face. So he was
Oh,
being impacted by the music, which was such a boost to me.
yeah.
Just as a,
Yeah,
from one
as an
song to
artist.
another, yes, as
Yeah.
an artist. So that meant so much. And he ended up playing he's played on both of these records, which
Wow.
has been a blessing to me too. Yeah.
Yeah, when Phil Keaggy thinks it's good, then it's good, right? That's what I
Yeah. So
think.
it meant a
Okay,
lot.
so tell me, what are you a reader? Do you read? Do you read
I
books?
love to
You
read.
do.
Oh yes. Um, I love to read, and so many books, so little time, right? Um,
Right, right. Yes, that's so
but
true. Do you ever go to the bookstore McKay's here in town in
I've
Nashville?
been, yes, I have
Love
been.
McKay's.
Mm-hmm.
I could do some damage there. Well, tell me what are you reading these days? Do you have a book?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I'm in between books. I just finished a book. I finished a book called Josiah's Fire. As I did an endorsement for it. So I know the author,
Mm-hmm.
and so she sent me like an advance copy, and it's called Josiah's Fire. Autism stole his words. God gave him a voice. It's by Tawny Colin with Cheryl Ricker, and Cheryl Ricker is my friend who sent me the book. But um, I
Is it about autism?
yeah, it's about a little boy who
Oh,
has
wow.
autism and has severe autism. So
Oh, wow.
um, anyway, just it's their family's journey about his therapy and trying to help him communicate and all that. And they discovered that, in fact, in a strange kind of almost like a supernatural way, God was giving him the ability to communicate through like an iPad
Oh, wow.
and communicate spiritual truths well beyond his years.
Mm,
And he writes poetry, and it's all through this iPad, and it's just astounding.
wow.
So anyway, I read it at first with a little bit of skepticism, like, oh, come on, I don't know about this, but I do believe that God can do anything with anyone at any time, with whomever he pleases, and so
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
beyond our own understanding.
Yeah.
So, so this is the book about his life, and
That's great. Oh, I'll have to look that up. That
yeah,
sparks my interest. That's really cool.
yeah.
What three things are you absolutely loving these days?
Oh, well, I'm a Zumba girl. Okay, so Zumba is my fun form of exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's sort of been an ongoing thing, part of my life. Favorite things. It sounds weird. I would say I eat a spinach salad almost every day.
You
So
do?
whether it be my lunch meal or my dinner meal, I try to eat a spinach salad every day.
Are
And
you just loving spinach these days, or are you just
well, I
it's
just
part
know
of?
it's a really healthy thing, and I got in the habit of doing that. So I almost always have the fixins for spinach salad, with hard boiled egg and
Yum.
mushrooms and those cran raisins, those craisins, and I just like add things to it to make it yummy or change it up a little bit. Those little matchstick carrots, throw in there,
Oh,
and a little bit
yeah.
of shredded cheese, and um, so I don't know. That's just the thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Do you like feta? Do you ever put? I like feta in spinach
Ooh,
salads.
I do love that. I haven't gotten the habit of buying that, but I do love it when I order at a restaurant.
Hmm. Well, because
Um,
I don't like blue cheese. Blue cheese is not my favorite, but I do. But that feta is just salty enough and
mhm,
crumbly and
so yummy. Yeah,
mm.
so yummy.
Spinach salad. Okay, what's your number three?
Number three, favorite things. Well, I'm looking down at the floor right now. My dog is sleeping there. I have a Shih Tzu.
Okay.
Her name's Daisy Doo. Daisy Doo, your friendly neighborhood Shih Tzu. I like to say. We've had her for years. She's been our family dog. She's probably 12 years old now, and I take her on frequent walks. And I actually sometimes I get song ideas while I'm walking her, and
Mm-hmm.
just kind of there's a rhythm, there's a pace of your feet as you're walking, and you sort of get an idea. So I've several songs have come that way. But I wrote a song. I shared that testimony earlier about the three things we need to survive, and I wrote a song on my 2012 release. The song is called Air, Food, and Water.
Yeah.
And that was on an album called So I Can Tell, which was my first album post-divorce that contained a lot of those healing songs and really minister to people in a season of loss or grief. But in that song, I mentioned my dog because God had deposited me and my daughter at this house in Franklin, and so I talk about He's given me air, food, and water, a house, a dog, and a lovely daughter. And so I mentioned the dog. She got an honorable mention in a song.
Oh, I've seen pictures of Daisy Doo. She's cute. Very,
Yes,
very cute.
she's world famous.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming on and sharing a bit of your life with us and what you do. And it was very interesting to hear about your songwriting and how you kind of came out of that whole time, that rough time that you've had. And we all have rough times. So that was good to hear. And I know that our listeners will want to connect with you, and we'll post that on our show notes. But thanks so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wasn't she great? I love that Cheri shares about healing and that she is pointing others towards restoration in their own lives. I felt so blessed after talking with her and was thankful that she shared her struggles as an artist who wanted to get her music out into the world again. And here she is doing it. I know you're going to want to get some of her music, and she is going to give Rising Stories listeners a special price. It's a 2 CD price for the price of one for all Rising Stories listeners in honor of her 1-year anniversary. So head over to CorineSandiford.com under Rising Stories podcast to get all the show notes and details about how to get this offer. I was also glad that she cleared up the big question I had about how she was related to Phil Keaggy. Thanks again for listening, and make sure you tune in next Thursday for another episode of Rising Stories.